Hello everyone and welcome back to Media Maker Showcase. My name is Hannah Bugarin and in today's episode we're going to be talking about the Hormonal Podcast and we're featuring a very special guest, the one and only Zarah Khondoker. So for those who don't know, Zarah is the founder and creative director for her podcast called Hormonal. Speaking of which, are you feeling...
I think I am.
You feeling...
Yeah.
What's the word? What's the word again?
Hormonal?
Hormonal! Yes, we love hormonal jokes. But first things first, Zarah, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am 19 and I'm a student at Rutgers University. So currently I'm studying public health and I want to get my master's and PhD in reproductive epidemiology. I love reproductive health and I love hormones and I just think it's such a great way to get into academia and, focus on reproductive health and endocrinology at the same time while also helping the general public with their health. So, and then also Hormonal Podcast has been like a project I've wanted to do for a really long time. I've always wanted to start a podcast and I feel like hormones was just like the perfect topic to do it on because I was actually looking for hormone podcasts like online and I was like, oh, there really aren't that many. And I was like, I've always wanted to start a podcast, so I think I should do this. And I just did.
Yeah, I love that. So for those who don't know what the Hormonal Podcast is, what would you say it's about?
Okay, so Hormonal is basically about hormones, and each of the episodes I wanted to kind of focus on a different sensation caused by a hormone. Hormones actually play into our lives in a number of ways that we don't even think about most of the time, so I kind of wanted to highlight that. So one of the episodes I have out right now is actually about nostalgia and how dopamine is actually responsible for creating the nostalgic feeling that you feel when you're watching movies or when you see an old picture of yours. So I also have other episodes coming out, like how hormones are used as like a business tactic to advertise different films, and like how when you feel scared when you watch a certain movie, or if you feel sad, like the hormones that play into that. There's also another episode coming out about leptin and ghrelin, which are the hunger hormones, which are actually responsible for like the growling stomach, or like, if you're like, oh, I'm so hungry or I'm so full. There's also another episode about tren, which is a very common steroid used amongst bodybuilders in the bodybuilding community, and how like your hormones can get messed up if you use these steroids. There's actually a lot of episodes that I have coming out, and I guess all of them are just focusing on different things that you didn't even know had to do with hormones, and that's like the best way I can describe it.
I'm very excited to see what you have in store for your podcast. So if you could compare Hormonal to a music artist or music genre, who or what would you compare it to?
I guess there's not really a certain artist that I would tie it to, but rather like a number of artists that I have in mind. So ever since I was in middle school, I've had this playlist, and it's like my motivation, reward, like drive playlist that I listen to when I'm doing homework, when I'm doing anything. So some of the artists that are in it are like Sam Tinez, Zayd Wolf, The Score, and they fall into like the alt-rock category. And the reason why I love them so much particularly is because they have like the most insane guitar riffs. So if you play any of the songs, they start off like, dun, and it's like very, very hard like guitar, and there's like very hard instrumentals. So like when you listen to it, you immediately are like transported into this like, I have to get up and go, like motivation, like it really like motivates me. So that's kind of like what I wanted to model Hormonal after. So Hormonal's logo is actually dopamine, which is like responsible for the reward circuits and motivation usually. So I wanted to combine like the alt-rock, like get up and go theme with Hormonal. So that's like, I guess what I would compare it to.
I love that. So is there a specific reason why you decided to dedicate your podcast to hormones?
Oh, yes. So I remember reading this book, and it was called Aroused, and I read it, I think, like 2 years ago, and it was written by this amazing, like, Yale epidemiologist and scientist, and she was amazing, and I wanted to learn more about hormones because I was into reproductive health at the time, right? So I learned that endocrinology was very important when talking about reproductive health. So I was like, this is like a really good introductory book to learn about hormones, because I heard about the book and each of the chapters were actually about a different hormone or the history of hormones. So I read it and I fell absolutely in love. I was like, oh my God, hormones are so cool. And then like from there, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books. So I was like, I need to read as much about hormones as I possibly can. I want to learn everything. And since I listen to a lot of podcasts, I was like, I'm going to try to find a hormone related podcast. And there actually weren't that many, or even if there weren't like the types of podcasts I wanted to see, because like they were mainly focusing on like women or just like a certain area of endocrinology. And I was like, oh, but like hormones are so much more than that. Like they're involved in films, they're involved in art, they're involved in like bodybuilding, they're involved in like plants. And I was like, I think there needs to be a podcast that talks about how versatile hormones actually are. So I was like, I've always wanted to start a podcast. It's been on my bucket list. So I think I should create a hormonal podcast. And so I did.
I love that. That's great. Was there any like inspiration behind your podcast? Like, was there any specific, maybe another podcast or something else that you were like, I kind of want to base it off this?
Okay, yes. I have a favorite podcast, actually two favorite podcasts, but they're not related to hormones. I just love the podcast in general. So one is This Podcast Will Kill You, and it's actually a public health podcast, and they talk about a different illness or like a different like disease that you would get, and like they break down like the signs and symptoms, the history of it, how it came to be. So like one episode would be like about malaria, how it's caused by mosquitoes, the history of it, the cures, fun facts, and it was really, really cool. And I was like, I love this podcast. I need to base it off that podcast. And then there's another podcast called The V Word, which is more about reproductive health. And they talked about like women's issues, like if you're on your period, if you have PCOS, fibroids. And like, I just loved how they broke down the concept so nicely, and it was so conversational. And I was like, I genuinely want to have a podcast like this, but it's hormones. So those are my top two favorite podcasts, and they're definitely two of my biggest inspirations.
So when you're going into like recording your podcast and everything, do you have like a specific outline of what you're gonna say, or do you kind of just like go off just like
oh my God, I could never go off. Like, I have to do so much research in advance because like I'm still a student. I'm in no means like a professional at all. I'm like a student, and I want to learn as much as possible about hormones as well as teaching it to other people. So before I do an episode, I create like this extensive outline, like a very extensive outline. Honestly, some of my outlines are 8 pages long because I'm like, I need to remember all of this. I cannot mess up for the sake of it like being inaccurate, medically inaccurate. I don't want to mess up on anything. So usually I will start off with the topic, and I will have the topic in mind, and I'm like, okay, so I want to do something on dopamine, and I will set out and like find a research study that correlates. I'll find some fun facts. I'll find like the history of the sensation, or like, just like any like information that's needed. And then I feel like when you have the different sections, all of it kind of comes together because you're like, oh, I can segue from this to this later on. So I just start off by writing what I want to cover first and then fill in the gaps later. And then when I'm going in to record, I have my outline out because I don't have it memorized at all, and I don't even want to have it memorized. So I have my outline out, and then on the spot, I actually think of a lot of other stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this study that I read a couple of years ago, and then I bring that in. So I have an outline, and then I just say something if I remember it. Yeah.
So do you like work with other people, or do you have to do this all on your own? Or?
Oh no, I work with a lot of other people because I do not know anything about like not recording, editing. Like I do not know how to edit it, and like I'm so happy that I have other people working with me on this because I don't think I could even think about doing this by myself at all. So yeah, I do have a lot of other people that work with me, and it's been so good.
Yeah, so do you have any specific goals that you have set in mind for Hormonal?
Yes. Oh my God, I have so many goals in mind. Let me tell you. So we are actually thinking about starting a YouTube channel and a TikTok. I've heard that TikTok gets a lot of views and like it's very popular. And I was thinking about doing a TikTok. I was very hesitant because I'm really like shy when it comes to like being on camera and talking because I get really nervous. So, but then my social media manager was like, no, you need to start a TikTok. And I was like, I guess. And she was like, we should do like a video version of Hormonal too. So like we like have it on a YouTube channel and we can take clips of that and do it on TikTok so Hormonal gets more viral. So definitely the biggest thing we want to do right now is get a TikTok and YouTube channel out for sure, like video versions of Hormonal and everything. And we are also actually, this is like a surprise for everybody, like nobody knows this yet, but there's actually gonna be a jewelry launch drop at the end of August, and it's really, really cool. So by the end of August, all of the episodes for season 1 of Hormonal are going to be out, and each episode is actually going to have like a correlating necklace or ring. Yeah, I know, it's really cool. So we're going to have like a dopamine necklace, and like it's so cool. It's so cool.
Oh my gosh.
It's really cool.
I'm super excited to see all that launch.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for introducing us to yourself and to Hormonal. We're going to take a quick break, and after the break, we're going to go more in depth about what you do as a creative director and the kind of technical aspect behind the podcast making. So we'll see you all in a minute.
Welcome to Black River Productions. Are you looking to get a film crew? Maybe take out some equipment, or possibly looking to just have a consultant overview your project to see if it's the right project for you? Well, look no further than blackriverproductions.net, our official website for Black River Productions, where we have all of that and more 24/7, 7 days a week. Maybe you're looking to support us in some way other than following us on our Instagram at Black River Productions on Instagram, or our YouTube, Black River Productions at youtube.com. You can go to our website and go to our merchandise shop, where we have our year 1 merchandise this year, our comfortable sweatshirts, our great shirts, as well as our great hats, our great apparel for anybody, regardless of the occasion. They are very simple, sleek designs, and maybe you don't want any clothing. We got water bottles, mugs, and we got a phone case for you if that's more your speed. Either way, check out blackriverproductions.net today.
Welcome back, everyone, to Media Maker Showcase. Zarah, so we've established before that you are both the founder and creative director for your very own podcast called Hormonal. So what does that entail? What does being a creative director entail?
So I think being creative director is literally the hardest thing at Hormonal for me. The reason for that is because you have to make sure everything looks uniform, starting from the podcast cover to the Instagram. All the marketing things that you are doing, they all have to be uniform. So I guess creative director is like where I kind of let my creative juices flow. I think of what everything's going to look like, what the Instagram's going to look like, what the content's going to look like, how am I going to do the merchandise, how am I going to do promotion, how is the website going to look like. So creative director is kind of just creating the design and like what the vision is for every single part of Hormonal, starting from the podcast to the website and social media. And for me, I kind of start off with like, what content am I going to post? What's it supposed to look like? And it's all the small, tiny details that you don't even think about. Like, what's it going to look like on the Instagram feed? Like, what is it going to look like after I post this, this, and this? And then on the YouTube, is everybody looking good? Is everybody in front of a white background? There's so many small details, and it's just, creative director is basically creating the vision of Hormonal, which is much harder than it looks. So many things going into it.
Yeah, so with so many things to do, I'm assuming that you work obviously with a whole other team of people. What would you say are key positions that go into creating a podcast?
Definitely people on audio. I know nothing about audio and editing, so I'm so grateful to have people who are photographers, who are audio editors. They're pursuing film majors, and they're really, really invested into this major and want to do this as their career. So like a lot of them are in Mason Gross, so I feel like a lot of the positions have to do with media, because I myself am not experienced with media at all. So I'm glad that they exist.
Yeah, so how were you able to reach out to all these different people?
Oh, okay. So I've had a lot of media friends since I was in middle school. Like, they were very interested in art, photography, and whatnot. And these were kind of just the people that I gravitated towards. I'm really into art and photography myself. I love exploring it, but I'm definitely not like advanced or anything in it. So coming into Rutgers, I had a lot of friends who were into photography, media, and I was like, hey, I want to start a podcast. Do you guys want to help out? And they were like, yeah, of course. And obviously they're in Mason Gross and they have their own resources. So they were like, oh, like, I actually know a couple people who can actually edit this for you. This person's pursuing a film major, they can help you out. This person's really interested. And then also just me posting on social media, I was like, oh guys, I'm starting a hormonal podcast. Does anybody want to join? I specifically need people who are experienced in kind of like audio editing, editing video, editing sound. And people slid up and they were like, oh my God, I'm so interested. I want to add this to my resume. I feel like everyone is just trying to get exposure these days. So I was just willing to take in whoever was willing to help at the time.
So why did you specifically choose a podcast format? Why not like a digital magazine or a video channel, for example?
So I guess podcast because I love talking to people. I love conversing with people like normally, like on my day-to-day life basis. And I feel like a podcast is so interesting. A lot of people listen to podcasts nowadays, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I was like, oh my God, like I could totally imagine myself starting a podcast because like I love hormones and like a podcast would be so cool. So I was like, I'm gonna do a podcast. Obviously, I'm going to have like a blog coming out with Hormonal like later on, but I feel like a podcast was a good way to get information out. People listen to it. You can have amazing conversations with it. And my thing about podcasts I've learned is that you can meet a lot of cool people. Like each episode you like have like a different person on, which is what I'm doing for Hormonal. And I feel like that is like the best part. You go on like a little journey with like whoever you meet on every single episode. You guys become closer and now you guys are together forever, I guess, like in terms of your resume. You guys can reach out to one another and it's just amazing because I've met like the most amazing people and I love it.
Yeah, and speaking of journeys, can you describe the journey that you took to that like kind of like led up to the first podcast episode?
Oh my God, yeah, okay, so that was a very loaded journey, a lot of things happening all at once. So I was like, I had to create a title, I had to create the theme, I had to create the aesthetic and everything. I reached out to so many people to help me with the podcast because I obviously could not have done it alone. And then for the episode, I planned out like, oh, I want it to be about dopamine, and I wanted to release it on Valentine's Day so that I could talk about like the sensation of love and dopamine, and I like wanted to have that in store. And I guess I started off researching dopamine. I already knew like a bit about it, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna create the episode for dopamine. And then I planned the outline, and then I actually used rss.com, which is a platform for podcasters, I guess. So you kind of pay like $10 per month, which is what I'm doing right now, and you upload your audio files on there, and they actually distribute it onto all the other streaming devices like Spotify, Amazon Prime, and whatnot. So I remember I created the outline, I created the aesthetic, I had all the content ready to go, and then I went into the studio, I booked the studio, and I went in with all my friends, the audio editors, and we recorded the first episode, and we were like, oh my God, we did it. And they edited it, and then it was Valentine's Day, we did all the posting, and then we posted it on Spotify. Oh, also fun fact, the first episode dropped at 7:57 because on the clock it would be 1957, which is the year dopamine was discovered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we like, we threw in a lot.
Easter egg in there.
Yeah, that was like the entire journey of the first episode.
Yeah, and of course, like, what's a journey without obstacles? Like, what were some struggles that you had faced during your initial phase of your podcast?
Oh my God, too many. There's always a technical difficulty, mostly with sound, I feel like. Because when I'm in the studio, a mic's not working, or the computer's not working, or the software's not working, or we don't know how to edit it. So I guess the most common obstacle that comes up, I'll be recording in the studio, and then I take it back, and they're like, oh my God, the audio is botched, like, what are we gonna do? So we like reach out to like 3 different people. We're like, can you fix the sound? And then if it doesn't work out, we end up cutting it, or we end up doing a new segment. I replace it. And I guess that is literally the hardest part, like editing and making sure everything is like nicely retouched, everything is good to go.
Yeah, and of course a lot goes into creating your podcast. So how do you manage planning and scheduling for your podcast?
Okay, so planning and scheduling, I kind of wanted Hormonal to be like a side gig for me in college, but I guess now it's like becoming like a bigger thing. I want to expand it into a bigger thing. So right now, I know that when college starts, I'm not gonna have as much time. So I'm taking the entire summer to plan out like weeks of content and then recording all of the episodes in advance, having everything ready to go so that when like the end of the summer starts, it's like ready to go one by one. And then I guess for season 1 of Hormonal, it would end by the end of summer. And then the first episode for season 2 would be on the day of Halloween. So you kind of leave like the time, like the September to October to plan. So like I don't do it while I'm doing college. I kind of leave like a gap for me to like get things together and then have it all ready to go.
Yeah, that's really smart. I also understand that you also have like a digital magazine and the Dopamine Diaries.
Yeah.
So how do you manage planning and scheduling between like all those 3 big projects?
Okay, so definitely I don't do it alone. I definitely have the help of all the people who are part of Hormonal. I know like so many people who are like, oh my God, we need to do a blog, right? So I was like, oh, like let's do it. So I kind of have 2 different teams. So it's like one is for the Hormonal audio team, and then one is like the digital magazine team. So the digital magazine team, we focus more on like what are the articles gonna be about, what are we gonna do, and like planning those out for the website. And then the Hormonal podcast team, we talk about more of the editing, the producing, and posting it to Spotify and all the streaming services.
So once you're done like posting your podcast episode, what are some key things that you always make sure to do after you publish?
You always gotta hype it up. You always have to hype it up. So after I post it, I get everybody and their mom to repost it on social media. So like after I post, I will go on Hormonal. I will create like, I think like 5 or 6 new stories like, hey guys, check out the podcast. I get my friends to promote it. And then if there's like a guest star, like they would probably also promote it. And then it kind of gets hyped from there. And then I also post like reels and like different types of content on Instagram. And everyone's like, oh, like what's that? Like it sounds kind of cool. Like I'll check it out.
Yeah, that's great. And if you could give a single piece of advice to anyone out there who wants to do something similar to what you're doing with Hormonal, what would that final piece of advice be?
This is gonna sound really corny, but I would say be authentic. You know, for Hormonal, I knew that hormones was going to be like a really like medical topic, but I was like, I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be something unique and different and have all these components to it. So I wanted to kind of combine like hormones and like my love for fashion and aesthetic. I wanted it to be something that people listen to for fun and they feel welcome and invited to learn about hormones, and they're like, wow, this is so cool. It's not just another medical thing that's out there. It's something that I like want to be a part of. I want to be her friend. Like I want everyone to like listen to Hormonal and be like, I want to be her friend. I want to know about hormones. So like I guess being authentic, like not sticking to like what is usually out there, but sticking to like what you can do and using your skill set and combining it with whatever you're passionate about.
Yeah, and I love that. Thank you so much for joining us here today
Of
and
course.
sharing your insight and experience with Hormonal and like the medical field in general. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed and learned something new. If you'd like to see our socials or really contact us, our info will be here. and if you'd like to see more from Hormonal, their info will be on Zarah's
Somewhere here.
somewhere on Zarah's side. But yeah, thank you all so much once again for coming here and tuning in, and thank you, Zarah, once again for joining us.
Of course.
I hope you all have a great day. I'm Hannah McGarn. This
I'm
is
Zarah. Oh wait.
That's Zarah, and I hope you have a great day, and don't forget to smile.